Wallace from the political website Conservative Home, also to Stephen Tall from the web blog Liberal Democrat Voice, and also to Mark Ferguson from Labour's e-network Labour List. Thanks to all of you for joining me here this morning as these results come in. Stephen, to you first, because we were listening there to Malcolm Bruce. It is looking already like it's going to be a pretty disastrous set of elections.
Yeah, we're kind of getting used to the grim results over the last 3 or 4 years of being in coalition, and that's kind of what you expect if you've been in government, done unpopular things. I guess what the party's looking for is, have the Lib Dems done okay in the seats that the party holds? And if you look in places like Eastleigh, Sutton, Birmingham, Dorset and so on, you see where Lib Dems have MPs, where they're working hard, then the results have bucked the trend.
So you've almost given up in terms of being a party of local government. It's now just about trying to secure those Westminster seats, is it?
I think the party would accept that for the Lib Dems, 2015 is a survival election. That's how party president Tim Farron's billed it. So yeah, it makes sense to focus your resources where you actually hold seats, rather than try and overreach and expect to win in places where clearly in the national picture at the moment the Lib Dems would not win.
Mark Ferguson, I mean, the dog days of Gordon Brown, and yet what, you're 3% up in the share of the vote. I mean, there will be a lot of Labour supporters who are scratching their head and saying, well, really, 12 months out from an election and only this, those sorts of modest gains?
Oh, look, Labour's got the most votes, the most seats, the most councils gained, the most seats gained. But look, I'd agree. You'd want Labour to be doing better than this at this stage in the electoral cycle.
So why aren't they?
UKIP's clearly had a huge impact. I think there's a large swell of people in the country who would have voted Labour, who would have considered voting Labour, who feel like politicians from not just Labour but all the main political parties don't speak to them, don't speak for them, don't speak to their issues.
They've been slow, Labour, haven't they, at recognising the threat from UKIP. For many years it was deemed a threat to the Conservatives. Labour slow in terms of the impact it could have on the working class vote for them.
I think it obviously has a massive impact on the working class vote, but actually I think it's a lot of people who might have voted Tory or Lib Dem in some of our heartland seats, but also it's a lot of people who didn't vote, who might have voted Labour 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago because they felt like Labour stood for them, but a lot of them feel disconnected from society and disconnected from politics. In that situation, unless that changes, it's going to be hard to win them back.
Mark Wallace, I mean, Labour, modest gains, but making gains, squeezed by UKIP as well. Is there a problem for the Conservatives, which is how do you win an outright win in 2015 with that going on?
Well, we've got huge structural challenges looking to 2015, not least the boundaries, which mean that we have to win by 6 or 7% of the vote on a uniform national swing just to win by one MP.
It doesn't look like that at the moment, anywhere near.
But I think there are a few glimmers of hope. The fact is, as the economy grows, the polls have been tightening. Labour, even Michael Foot outperformed Labour at this stage when he was in opposition. And we know what happened to him in the end. So the polls are starting to turn. There are some bits of hope. But there's still this question of UKIP. They've clearly eaten into some of Labour's heartland vote, but those aren't marginal seats.
Have you been robust enough? Has David Cameron been robust enough? Didn't debate with Nigel Farage. Has he been robust enough in actually taking him on?
Well, I don't think that debating with Nigel Farage does people that much good, as the Lib Dems and Nick Clegg have unfortunately for them demonstrated. But there's a fundamental question of trust. The Conservative Party has helped, unfortunately and inadvertently, to create this UKIP monster by treating them very dismissively, particularly treating their voters dismissively. And now there's a question
Lord
of trust.
Tebbit was scathing about that remark a few years ago from David Cameron about Looney's fruitcakes and closet racists. He said that fundamentally was such a mistake in terms of alienating Conservative voters or possible Conservative voters.
Yeah, and a lot of the Conservative grassroots, people who read Conservative Home, don't recognise a lot of these descriptions, because a lot of us know decent Conservatives, hard-working, long-standing members of the party who have, for one reason or another, frustration or temptation, joined UKIP.
Stephen Tall, let me ask you about going forward, what the Liberal Democrats can do differently, because if you look at what Nick Clegg has tried to do over recent years, he's tried just about everything. He has had that debate with Nigel Farage, he's apologised for the U-turn on tuition fees, he's put himself about, he's distanced himself from the coalition. None of it's worked.
Yeah, you're right. It's, the solace the party is taking, I guess, is that we're looking at perhaps retaining 40 seats after the next election. That's what today's results look like they'll give us in 2015. But in terms of what the party can do to try and pick up from that, it's you're right. We've thrown the kitchen sink at it. There was the Nick v Nigel debate, and there's been a differentiation from the Conservatives in coalition. We're hoping that within the next year, people actually get to the decision time of May 2015, when people really think about who they want to run the country, as opposed to who they want to protest against in local elections and European elections. People don't necessarily take us seriously. That will mean that the Lib Dem vote will hold up, certainly in the seats that we really need to hold on to.
Mark, back to Labour. Do you think you've got an Ed Miliband problem, and that is part of why you haven't made the progress perhaps you should have done?
I think we've got an engaging with the public problem. I think we've got an engaging with voters problem, and that's not just
But
about
he is central to that, isn't he?
Well, look, it's not just about Ed Miliband. I think it's about politics in general. It's about politics as usual. I don't think there are any
And
political
leadership?
leaders. Well, I think there's any political leader of any major political party, with the exception of Nigel Farage, who divides more than he unites, who reaches out to a large portion of the public and speaks to them.
But
I think
you're
that's an
4 years into austerity, and that poll last week had Ed Miliband as a personal rating the lowest he's ever recorded. I mean, why is that?
I think what Ed Miliband needs to do is to do two things. One, show people that he has the answers and he has the vision and he is the person that Britain needs to take us forward. But that needs to be particularly a positive vision for Britain. I think too often it's easy, especially in elections like this, to get into campaigning that is about what you don't want. There are basically 11 months left now until the general election, and it has to be about what Ed Miliband thinks
Yes,
Britain
there's
does
a
need.
lot being made of strategy and how it's sort of almost retreated to the core vote plus Lib Dems, and that lesson from Tony Blair, the aspirations of voters, not really there as it should be. Do you think that's right?
You've got to reach out to the largest pool of people possible if you want to win an election.
And they're not doing that at the moment.
I think they would say that they are, but clearly what we're seeing is that that's not transferring through to the public yet. The public aren't picking up on that, and the public aren't voting that way. But however, Labour has had some success in some of the southern marginals it needs to win.
Okay.
But you can't play politics in tiny little areas like that. You've got to appeal to the whole country.
Let's whiz down the line. One sentence from each of you in terms of what you think, as a result of these elections, or perhaps Monday's elections, what will change policy-wise coming out of your particular parties, or we'd like to see coming out of your parties?
I think we need to appeal directly to the people who are voting UKIP who could have been Tories instead. We need to show them radicalism. We need to show different voices in particular talking to them about how we can change politics.
I don't think it's about changing policy for the Lib Dems. I think it's about trying to shout a bit louder about things like tax cuts for the low paid, which have happened because the Lib Dems are in government, but which perhaps the public haven't heard about.
I think it's about having the biggest, most positive vision for a better Britain, and that needs to be building on the cost of living crisis, but not just relying on it.
Okay, Mark, Stephen, Mark, thanks very much for those thoughts. Thanks for your time.